Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Purple Ivy Brown Bag series. I'm delighted to be kickstarting our second session with two fantastic speakers, Fredrik Nilzén from Swedbank. I hope I pronounced your last name properly because I did check with you and 10 other people prior to that. And I also would like to welcome my colleague Rebecca Oliver from Purple Ivy, and also welcome everyone else that is slowly trickling into this studio. So I'm Christina Ameln. I am the Sustainability Strategist and Advisor at Purple Ivy. This is our second brown bag lunch, which is focused on engaging and gaining momentum within sustainable finance. So the brown bag concept, we had this idea that we would take the concept of the informal meeting that generally occurs in the workplace around the lunchtime. And due to current circumstances, we decided to take this online. And we're so happy to see that so many people have been interested by it. And already 2 weeks ago, when we had our first session, we had tons of questions. So when we're talking about tons of questions, please do ask your questions early on. I will see them in the comments section of the live link, and we will try to get through as many of them in the half an hour as possible. So as we wait for the audience to join our studio, let me do a quick intro of our wonderful speakers. So as usual, I have my little cheat notes here. Fredrik. So Fredrik, you're the head of group sustainability of Swedbank with the responsibility to support, govern, and manage sustainability considerations across the banking business in 4 home markets. Swedbank's vision is a financially sound and sustainable society where Swedbank empower the many people and businesses to create a better future. He has a passion for impact, digitalization, and sustainable society. Welcome, Fredrik.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I've got Rebecca Oliver, who's the Sustainability Strategist and Associate at Purple Ivy. She has a background in risk management at Unilever, scenarios and global leadership at the Telberg Foundation, and sustainability science at Future Earth. Rebecca tells me that her passion for risk management has turned into a passion for finding exciting opportunities in building a sustainable future now that there is such momentum in sustainable finance. And this is so fun that we're talking about sustainable finance. It could be a very heavy topic, but we're hoping that with this kind of casual, informal brown bag, we can have you ask many more interesting questions and maybe lighten the whole concept of sustainable finance. But as we get going, so Fredrik, I have a question. Tell me what is going on, because I think the concept of sustainable finance is really picking up momentum, and it's kind of gained such a speedy momentum in the last years. Would you explain the concept in itself and also how your role has changed over the years?
Small question, Christina, I must say, but let me give it a try at least. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting to begin with. Looking forward to speak here together with you, Rebecca, as well. I think 3 things that I want to mention at least is that, yes, we need to conclude, I think, that the first time that the financial services space, in a sense, was being an integral part of the agenda was in the Paris Agreement. I think it was Article 2C, where it was clearly stated that we needed to be there in order to shift the flows of finance and capital towards more sustainable activities. So I think that started off a lot of talking, I must say. there has been a lot of talking now for many years, but I think it's been necessary as well. Though in 2020 and 2021 now, there's no question. Everybody's locked on target. I mean, it is the Paris Agreement, but then also the Sustainable Development Goals being super fundamental. But also with that said, the climate matters. They climb up on the risk ladder, but also in terms of opportunities, business opportunities in the transition that will be created. The second thing that I would say that has also shifted is the leadership that is emerging. Is not only that people are trying, or organizations or countries a little bit, but EU is really picking up, seeing that this future of sustainable finance and transitioning the society, it's the space coming out with climate commitments. We see China as well, and we see US coming back on board and others. So this massive momentum of leadership is somewhat have gone over some kind of tip now, and now it just flows in a way. And the third thing is then that it's more focused on making it happen now, not only talks but also doing. And we can see, at least around finance, we might talk a little bit more on that, but the principles for responsible banking, we have the TCFD, the task force for financial related disclosures. But also, in a sense, we see that massive wave of sustainable finance regulations coming out from EU, and together it creates more frameworks and more clarity on how to expand in this space. So I think those three, I mean, we're locked on target. There's a massive momentum and leadership, and we're into practice, not only into talking.
Fredrik, going back to my last question, because I think I wrapped up all the questions into one sentence. So if you could also focus in on how your role has changed in the last couple of years. So what's different from when you started off, and what are you doing more or less right now in the role as a sustainability lead in a financial institution?
No, but I think a couple of things. I mean, looking backwards on banking, banking and access to capital, it's been fairly passive in a way, role. But now we're seeing that in this shift is mostly probably the financial flows, but also innovation of business models and technology. Those are the components that can accelerate this change. And given that, we then have a more proactive role in the dialogues with our customers to also educate our customers, but educate ourselves. And together, in a sense, in companionship, we need to figure out what are the key risks that needs to be mitigated, but also what are the key opportunities that will build your future revenue streams. So it's a matter of bringing the hands together on how we will survive long term, really. And that is a new role for banking, I would say. More proactive, for sure.
And if we use the words that Fredrik just said about bringing together, and we open it up to the broader context, Rebecca, what does this mean for the companies that we are working with at Purple Ivy?
Well, the momentum from the finance sector, it's absolutely fantastic for companies because they get strong partners in their transition to becoming part of a sustainable future, which is really what every company wants to do. But if we're not careful, it can also be a new distraction or a strain, extra stress. It might push in a direction that's not strategically right for one particular company. And that's why I think that getting sustainability integrated into company strategy is the best way to get the most out of sustainable finance. And as Fredrik said, banks are ramping up their internal expertise on different aspects of sustainability, climate change, water, biodiversity, sustainable resources. And it's going to be critical for companies that they are not judged just as a collection of sustainability metrics, but as a whole enterprise, on a journey that's paved with uncertainties and with innovation. And we need to remember that companies deliver on many, many fronts. They deliver to customers, employees, local communities where they operate, as well as being part of this drive to stop climate change in its tracks and create a dynamic and hopefully circular economy. But ultimately for companies, I feel that the finding a balance between financial support, performance and meeting expectations on sustainability is going to be enormously helped by this new momentum in sustainable banking.
But just to add, Rebecca, there, I think that was really great that you mentioned that, because these days are days of uncertainty, and we need to remember that. And we also know that, you know, when technology is coming in as strong as it is now, and a lot of companies are also betting high on that technology will solve a bit of their problems. We know that there are also failures in technology. Not all technology will be winners. And historically, we have managed to keep our eyes on one technology ball and give that all the oxygen it needs in order to go big. But we don't have that opportunity now. We need all these different technologies and roads towards a more sustainable society to pick up. And what I fear is that we won't be able to do that with that breadth of solutions, really. But then as well, I mean, there is so much money out there now that just want to find the assets, the investments, the projects that enable this. So there's much more money right now, at least, low interest rates as well. Then there are projects, initiatives, engagements that are paving the way. So how in the world will we fit that amount of money that want to be invested in this future?
And if I can add to that question there, how would you close the gap? Now we're diverging a little bit from our list of questions, but how would you? we're on a structure here, but I'm diverging totally. But if we were to ask both of you, how would you close this gap?
Well, I think the definition of sustainability is the key, and you talked about it needing to be broad in relation to technologies. But you know, there are other concepts that are bubbling up that are going to have a huge impact soon, like biodiversity, and so and the taxonomy is introducing the concept of do no harm. What does that mean? Sustainability has always been about trade-offs and understanding what is going to allow natural systems to function or be resilient, and what is going to allow the economy to be resilient. So I think the definition of sustainability cannot be too narrow, because we don't know what a sustainable future looks like, and we're feeling our way forward. And that's why I like this emphasis on having a proper discussion between companies and their financiers, so that you don't end up just using, you know, massive spreadsheets and huge Excel files and try to tick off, and which I think ESG has been a little bit like that. We need to be more active, as you said, Fredrik.
And if you want to be active, we've got a question actually from Purple Ivy on the comment section. I think they're actually indicating to everyone else in the audience, do trickle those questions in. The question here is, you talk about the need of leaders stepping up and taking the lead for this. So do they, Fredrik?
Some do, some don't. I think we could be honest by saying that the type of leadership that we have seen during the past 50 years, very logical leaders in a sense, you know, have not saying that it's always been safe bets, not like that, but still, you know, you have all data points on the table, and you see the projection, and you know the steps. And there's very little uncertainty in the majority of business decisions. That's not the underlying society we're in right now. We're shifting into something totally different. And there is uncertainty, as you said, Rebecca, in that movement. So then you need leaders that also have a visionary, or, you know, a little bit more of courage, maybe, to be extremely clear on the direction.
And one of the things that you have been leading or engaging, so leading, engaging, maybe being courageous, is this this momentum, and that you are one of the founding members of the United Nations Principles for Sustainable Banking. Can you explain a little bit more about your engagement and how Swedbank has engaged with this UN Finance initiative?
Yeah, I think it kind of said we've been a part of UN Finance working group for a while, or many years. But then, seeing this shift and also seeing that our role as a bank is shifting, we really felt that when this opportunity came up of engaging in setting down core principles for responsible banking was really good. So the UNPRI, a lot of people do know about, but for banking broadly, there wasn't anything. So we engaged, I think we were 130 banks in September 19 or something like that, that were the founding members. I would also give credit to Nordea in the Nordic context, because they definitely they led the bank group in the Nordics in a really good way in this collaboration, and most big banks in the Nordics joined up. But in practice, I would say it's 6 principles. And what you should know is that when you commit to the principles, you also commit to align your future business strategy towards the Paris Agreement. But in addition to that, also contribute to the fulfillment of the SDGs. So it is super sharp commitment. And then you also commit to working through your customers and drive the direct impact, but also to disclose impact where you have the most positive impact, where you also have the most negative impact. And you can imagine here, suddenly we're all struggling with the concept of understanding what are the most financially material questions for a company in different sectors. But then now we're coming in and talking about impact materiality as well. So I mean, here we have the perfect storm when we manage to conclude on where there is a financial potential positive outcome over there, when it goes in line with the contribution that we need to bring to the society on how the society is developing. So the PRB, as we call it, they kind of bring these things together. It's not easy, and we have just been through our first impact analysis that we will disclose next week in our annual report. But it's a first attempt. Methodologies are developing, but it's been a fantastic journey so far, I must say. New content, new aspects coming out.
Yeah. It sounds really, really interesting, because I think if you go back a couple of years, you wouldn't have thought of financial numbers together with impact, and that combination. It sounds like should be on opposites and odd bedfellows, as I say. Now they're slowly all creeping into bed together, and it'll be nice what kind of kids you turn out.
It normally takes a couple of years before the kids are grown-ups, as you know.
So it's a journey. It's a journey.
It is.
It's a journey. Well, I'm going to add here, because I do have a follow-up question to Rebecca on this. I do want to reach out to the audience that is listening in. Do post your questions. We would love to hear them. And to Rebecca, as we follow on to this part of the question, could you maybe put this in development in context? So this journey of the UN Principles for Sustainable Banking, these exercises that are taking place, and these future teenagers that are going to pop up.
Well, I mean, first of all, the UN Principles on Sustainable Banking is a critical part of the sustainable finance evolution, because while the financial markets are open to pressure in shareholder meetings with annual reports, and there's been shareholder activism, divestment campaigns, all kinds of public involvement and shareholder involvement in sustainability. lending hasn't been so transparent. So there's been a large part of the financial machinery that hasn't been open. And I feel strongly that the principles on sustainable banking are bringing trust to this area, bringing structure, and asking for new transparency, as you mentioned, Fredrik. So it's there's a family of initiatives, as you mentioned. It's becoming a bit of an alphabet soup. I almost feel like I'm back in academia. So after ESG, we got the TCFD, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Risk Disclosures, which is really looking at climate risk as a financial aspect. And then came the taxonomy, which is a bit like an eco-label for investments. And now we have the principles for banking, and I think that this together they are a real positive force for change, and they're all about moving capital to where it's needed to build the future. And so my only concern here is, I've been hearing companies, our clients, saying, oh, the taxonomy is going to be a huge amount of work, and it shouldn't be. The taxonomy is for primary producers in a number of sectors. Companies with complex supply chains should just say, we're not taxonomy relevant. We need to keep it as simple as we can and understand what the goal is and get the communications and the information exchange right. Otherwise, we're going to be distracting companies from the most important thing, which is to work out what do they look like in a sustainable future, and how to get there, and who's going to help them finance it, and are their investors going to stick with them, and are their banks going to be proudly declaring them? I think that we just keep the goal ahead of us, and it's all about engagement, I think.
I think the hard part in any part of sustainability is indeed trying to keep it simple, but that's the charm of it, trying to keep it simple at the same time of embedding some of these complex items. I have a question here coming.
Can I comment on that, Christina?
Sorry. Of course. Do interrupt.
It was so interesting. No, but I meet that quite a lot internally, but also with customers, that the word complexity comes out, and I fear that the complexity puts, you freeze. You don't take action, and you fear of taking a small step because you might fear that it becomes wrong, and you need to be Johan Rockström for being able to go into a grocery store soon in order to make the right pick. And that is a problem, that complexity issue, and especially for finance, because when things become complex, then you cannot scale your operations. If you need, very sharp, specific judgment in every step that you take in every transaction, then you cannot scale transactions. So with that said, the work that EU is doing, trying to set, standards of things, and there are other bodies that are trying to set standards as well, the standards will also pave the way for scale within finance.
Yeah.
So the simplicity is important, but obviously it cannot be as simple as it takes away the underlying purpose. So here is it's almost philosophical, right? But this is one of the main issues right now.
And if you go from the philosophical, because now I just stumbled on those words because it is a word that you stumble on. But the question I have here, if you can turn it into the practical, how will the relationship between banks and companies be influenced by all of this? Oh, you got it. We were actually, a little side note, we were all talking about which of our children would pop up in the background. And we had a nice conversation about that early on. And I think it's absolutely lovely, Fredrik, that your child, and you got, I was asking for tea. What did you get?
I got lunch.
Well, it is a brown bag lunch, so this is perfect. So
Yeah.
I'll go back to the question: how, when we talk about the practical side, how will the relationship between banks and companies be influenced by all of this?
I hope, and I believe, and I see that as well, is that we get a lot of appreciation from our customers when we're at the table understanding the complexity of transition. I think it will take, for some sectors, it will take time in order to make a controlled transition of society, for sure. But in that dialogue, we hope and we see that the bank comes even closer to the strategy of the companies, the leadership of the companies, the boards of the companies. We need to be even closer in our relationships due to the fact that we are also dependent on information and that they move. If they don't move, we will have problems staying with them. So we will get closer. That is what I see, Christina, I would say.
And would you say there's any challenge? So that's a question for both of you. What's the biggest challenge you've seen with regards to this engagement? And I know it's a conversation on journey and momentum. We talk about momentum, but we don't want it to be a momentum for too long. So what are the challenges and how can we kind of decrease that momentum?
I'm not sure what you mean by decreasing the momentum, but I'm thinking of these to try to reduce the complexity. Maybe we need to find narratives that are setting the scene very quickly. And as a biologist, I tend to see everything as an ecosystem, especially the economy, with connected feedback loops and interdependencies and things. Just not trying to look at each one of them, but just the sense of an ecosystem. And to try to read this evolving ecosystem, I like to use very simple scenario thinking. So you just identify where your company has the potential to take the initiative, and put that into your strategy work. So when you're communicating with your finances, whether it's your bank or your investors, you are putting your current situation in a context which is part of a longer term narrative, so you can see where you're going from where you are now. And I think that if you can have that in place, you can avoid being reactive, because I think that's the most dangerous thing, that everyone tries to be reactive to get the right profile in these declarations and all the demands for information. I don't know if that made sense, Fredrik. How did you look?
It does, for sure. It does. I'm taking it in, processing. But I think to add to that, for financial services to really take this role and expand and accelerate, the access to data and methodologies that are trustworthy will be key. Will be key. Otherwise, across hundreds of thousands of customers and billions of transactions, you cannot specifically alter every single small attraction at every time in a special way. So you need to find data points that support your decision making and trustworthy methodologies or models that you apply that work. So that is for sure a key piece, and that is also, as we see it, the biggest challenge right now, because this type of data supporting our decisions is not available in the market today, not from our customers, not from our government or any other. But the second thing that I also wanted to mention is that we need to be extremely curious and not have, feeling that we're blamed for the history because we were just stupid and acted as there were no tomorrow. But now we have new knowledge, and we all have a responsibility to pick up that knowledge, be curious, learn new things, and find new ways of doing things. And without that curiosity, we won't be able to do this. So I think those 2 points I also want to add here.
We're coming to the end of our session here, but I do have a question from Akash, and he is, funny enough, his first sentence, "I am curious." So it's a quite nice segue in. I did not do that on purpose, I promise. So nice segue here. "I am curious. I find that in India, banks are mostly focused on growth, scale, and customer acquisition. How should these banks understand sustainability?" And this is a question we all had a discussion about on this integration across markets as well. What do you say to that?
Rebecca, you want to start?
I feel that these tools that are emerging will help, and I think that my sense is that there is a wind of change blowing, and I don't think that the financial market is sufficiently national and isolated for them to be immune to the changes that are happening. So there are Indian banks already that are part of the UN principles for sustainable banking. And if I'm right, Fredrik, I have the list somewhere. So I think the change will arrive, but that's all I can really say. Maybe a bank should answer first.
No, in fact, I was heading in the same direction, that financial markets are global. They are. And then obviously this bank that you're referring to, I mean, how does that investor base look like for that bank? And I'm sure there are many international investors in that bank already. And just as they put requirements on us, we also have international investors. They will put requirements on the Indian banks. And given the magnitude of this momentum, they will also need to answer all of those, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions that we're answering every day on these topics. So it will come sooner or later, but obviously each market will have their differences given what is material and how their economy looks and all of that. But it will come. But if they're not curious in the topic, if they're not learning new things, if they're not trying to get into it, then they increase their risk for their future survival, as I see it. Just as we agree within our bank that we need to get into this game faster than some others. Otherwise, we will be the last ones with the lousiest assets that don't transition. And that's not good business. That's not good business for a bank.
It's amazing. The word that always keeps popping up is how interconnected we are. So we as people are interconnected, whatever continent we sit on. Sustainability is interconnected. And here you're saying as well, sustainable finance. So finance is interconnected. As we wrap up, I am giving you the floor for a brief one sentence. What would you like to leave the audience with? So Rebecca, what's your one sentence to wrap up this half an hour?
I think that this point that we're talking about, the relationship between companies and their banks or their finances, it's the most exciting place in sustainability at the moment. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very exciting.
Fredrik?
Yeah, I must come back to be curious. And come to the financial sector if you really want to achieve impact.
Thank you so much for both of you. I want to wrap up with the words that you shared at the very beginning of the session, this brown bag lunch, and that's both your passions for impact, digitalization, sustainable society, exciting opportunities, and jumping onto the sustainable finance model. And again, be curious. So thank you so much, both of you. Thank you to the audience. And we look forward to seeing you for our next brown bag very soon.
Well, it's next week, actually.
Next week. Yes. we get all the help here. Next week, next Thursday. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Fredrik. Thank you, Rebecca.
Bye-bye.
Bye.